At my graduation, the entire auditorium froze when my sister stood up and screamed that I had cheated for 4 years. They thought they were watching my degree get ripped away, but they did not know I had already pulled the pin and set the stage, just waiting for her to detonate her own life. They were witnessing her reputation burn, not mine. If you were there, would you side with the one screaming or the one walking silently toward the podium? My name is Harper Lane. I am 24 years old, and for exactly 3 seconds, I believed that the hardest part of my life was finally over. I stood from my seat in the front row, the heavy fabric of my graduation gown rustling against my ankles like a dark, silken tide. The air in the auditorium smelled of cheap floor wax, stale coffee, and the overwhelming, suffocating scent of lilies that the university had arranged in massive bouquets along the stage. It was a humid afternoon in Denver, the kind where the heat presses against the windows, but inside, under the industrial air conditioning, it felt cold enough to preserve a dead body. I smoothed the front of my gown. I took a breath. The dean of the psychology department, a stern man named Elliot Warren, was standing behind the podium, adjusting his spectacles. He had just called my name. Harper Lane. Summa cum laude. The Latin words tasted sweet, even just thinking them. A validation of 4 years of sleepless nights, caffeine tremors, and the relentless, grinding pressure to prove that I was more than just the quiet sister, the background noise in someone else's main event. The applause started. It was polite at first, then swelling into something genuine. My classmates knew me. They knew I was the one who stayed in the library until 2 a.m. They knew I was the one who tutored the freshmen when they were failing statistics. For the first time in my life, the noise in the room was for me. I took my first step toward the stairs leading up to the stage. The lights were blinding, turning the sea of faces into a blurry mosaic of smiles and camera flashes. I allowed myself a single, fragile smile. And then, the sound of a chair scraping against the concrete floor cut through the applause like a gunshot. It was a violent, ugly sound, the screech of metal legs being shoved back with aggressive force. It came from the family section, directly behind me. The applause faltered, stumbling over itself as heads turned. The rhythm of the ceremony broke. My heart hammered against my ribs, not with surprise, but with a sickening, heavy thud of recognition. I did not need to turn around to know who it was. I had spent my entire life memorizing the specific frequency of her need for attention. She cheated! The voice tore through the air, high-pitched and trembling with a rage that sounded almost theatrical. It was a voice I had heard whisper secrets to me in the dark when we were children, and the same voice that had sliced my confidence into ribbons over the dinner table for a decade. I froze, one foot on the bottom step of the stage stairs. The silence that followed was absolute. It was not the silence of peace. It was the vacuum of a bomb blast before the shockwave hits. I turned my head slowly, just enough to see her. Savannah Lane, my sister. She was standing in the third row, a beacon in a pristine white blazer that caught the stage lights, making her glow like some avenging angel. Her hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawless, but her face was twisted into a mask of righteous indignation. She was pointing a manicured finger straight at me, her arm rigid, her chest heaving. "She cheated throughout all 4 years of university," Savannah screamed again, her voice echoing off the high ceilings of the auditorium. "That degree does not belong to her." The auditorium, which held over 500 people, seemed to inhale all at once. The stillness was terrifying. Then, the murmurs began, a low, buzzing hive of confusion and scandal. I saw phones rising in the air like lit candles, glowing screens recording the spectacle. I was no longer a student graduating. I was content. I was a viral moment waiting to be uploaded. The audience had instantly transformed into a jury, their eyes darting between the accuser in white and the accused in black. My blood ran cold, but my mind was strangely, terrifyingly clear. Most people would panic. Most people would cry. If this had happened 5 years ago, I would have dissolved into a puddle of tears and begged for forgiveness for crimes I had not committed, but I was not that girl anymore. As I looked at Savannah, watching her bask in the sudden, total attention of the room, I felt a click in my brain. It was the sound of a safety catch being released. Finally, I thought, the words rang in my head with the clarity of a bell. Finally, you showed your face before I had to drag you into the light myself. I turned back to the stage. I looked up at Dean Warren. He was gripping the sides of the podium, his knuckles white. He looked shocked, his eyes wide behind his glasses, darting from me to the screaming woman in the audience. But then, his gaze dropped. It was a quick, almost imperceptible movement. He looked down at the floor, directly beneath the chair he had been sitting in just moments ago. I knew what he was looking at. I knew because I had put it there. 45 minutes before the ceremony began, while the janitorial staff was doing their final sweep, I had slipped into the auditorium. I had taped a thick manila envelope to the underside of the dean's chair. It was heavy. It contained transcripts, printed emails, bank statements, and a flash drive containing audio files that would turn my sister's world into ash. I had hoped I wouldn't need it. I had hoped that maybe, just maybe, Savannah would let me have this one day. I had hoped she would let me walk across the stage and leave quietly, allowing me to sever ties with my toxic family in private. But I knew Savannah better than she knew herself. I knew she could not stand to see me win. I knew that the sight of me in a cap and gown, receiving an honor she had never achieved, would be too much for her ego to survive. I had set the stage, loaded the gun, and placed it on the table. All she had to do was pick it up and pull the trigger. And she just did. "Do not give her that diploma," Savannah yelled, stepping out into the aisle now, marching toward the front like she owned the building. "She plagiarized her thesis. She bought the exam answers online. I have seen the receipts. She is a fraud." The murmurs grew louder. I could hear distinct words now. "Is it true? Who is that? Oh my God. Look at her face. This is insane." I forced my legs to move. It felt like walking through water. My knees wanted to buckle. My stomach was churning with bile. But I locked my jaw. I lifted my chin. Step, step, step. I could feel the heat of the spotlight on my skin, burning me. Every eye in the room was drilling into my back. They were waiting for me to run. They were waiting for me to scream back. They were waiting for the breakdown. But I denied them that satisfaction. I focused on the texture of the stairs under my feet. The red carpet was worn slightly in the middle. I focused on the dean's face. He was not looking at the envelope anymore. He was looking at me with a mixture of horror and confusion. He did not know what to do. The ceremony script did not have a section for Sister of the Valedictorian has a meltdown. "She does not deserve to be up there." Savannah's voice cracked, sounding desperate now, manic. Ask her right now if she wrote that paper herself. She is lying to all of you." I reached the top of the stairs. I was now standing on the same level as the faculty. The height gave me a vantage point. I could see everything. I could see my parents in the row next to Savannah. My mother had her hands over her mouth, her eyes wide with what looked like shock, but she was not moving to stop her. My father was staring at his shoes, shrinking into his suit, terrified of the scene but too weak to intervene. They were letting this happen, just like they always did. They thought they were watching my destruction. They thought they were witnessing the moment Harper Lane was exposed as a failure, stripping me of the one thing I had built for myself. But they were wrong. They were not watching my end. They were watching the opening credits of their own demise. I walked to the center of the stage. The music had stopped completely now. The silence was heavy, thick with tension. I stopped 3 feet from Dean Warren. He looked at me, then looked out at the security guards who were starting to move hesitantly down the side aisles. "Harper," the dean whispered, his voice barely audible over the hum of the air conditioning. "What is going on?" I looked him in the eye. I did not blink. My face was a mask of calm, a stone wall against the tsunami of humiliation crashing against my back. I could still hear Savannah screaming, her voice rasping now, listing dates and fabricated crimes, throwing every lie she had concocted over the last 6 months into the open air. I leaned in slightly, just close enough that only the dean could hear me. I did not look at the audience. I did not look at my sister. "It is done," I whispered. It was not a confession. It was not an apology. It was a notification. The dean frowned, confusion deepening the lines on his forehead. He did not understand yet. He did not know that the envelope under his seat contained the proof that every accusation Savannah was currently screaming was actually a projection of her own sabotage. He did not know that by the time this ceremony was over, the woman in the white blazer would be the one facing an investigation, not me. I turned my head slowly toward the audience. I found Savannah in the crowd. She was red-faced, panting, standing in the middle of the aisle. Her finger still pointed at me. She looked triumphant. She thought she had won. She thought she had stripped me naked before the world. I held her gaze for 1 second, just one, and in that second, I let the corner of my mouth twitch. Not a smile, just a tremor of acknowledgement. "I see you, and I was waiting for you." Then, I turned back to the podium and waited for the dean to hand me the empty leather folder that was supposed to hold my degree. I stood there, bathed in light, while my name was dragged through the mud by the person who shared my blood. The question is, if you were sitting in that auditorium, watching a girl stand silent and alone on a stage while her own sister screamed that she was a liar and a thief, who would you believe? Would you stand with the woman yelling the loudest, the one demanding justice with fire in her eyes? Or would you wonder why the girl on stage did not flinch, and why she walked toward the fire instead of running away from it? Would you have joined the mob? Or would you have waited to see what was inside the envelope? To understand why my sister tried to burn my life to the ground on the most important day of my academic career, you have to understand the house we grew up in. It was a perfectly average 2-story home in a suburb of Denver, painted a soft beige that was supposed to look welcoming but always felt a little too neutral, like a waiting room. We had a sprawling front lawn that my father mowed every Saturday morning at 8 o'clock sharp, and in the backyard, there was an old metal swing set that rusted a little more with every winter. That swing set was where I spent most of my childhood, moving back and forth in the air, watching my life happen through the kitchen window. For as long as I can remember, Savannah was the sun, and the rest of us were just planets caught in her gravitational pull. She was 3 years older than me, and she was everything I was not. She was loud, vibrant, and possessed a terrifyingly natural charisma that made adults want to please her and children want to be her. She was the captain of the cheerleading squad, the lead in the school play, and the girl who always blew out the candles on the cake, even if it was technically someone else's birthday. I was the footnote. I was the quiet one, the one with her nose buried in a paperback novel, the one who was taught, implicitly and explicitly, to wait for a pause in the conversation that never came. My parents never told me to shut up, not in so many words. It was subtler than that. It was a gentle hand on my shoulder during dinner parties, a soft hush when I tried to interrupt Savannah's monologue about her day. "Let your sister finish," my mother would say. "She is telling us something important." And it was always important. If Savannah found a penny on the sidewalk, it was a miraculous sign from the universe. If I won a spelling bee, it was nice. But could I please move my trophy so Savannah had room to display her homecoming queen sash? I remember a specific Thanksgiving dinner when I was 14. The table was crowded with aunts, uncles, and cousins, the air thick with the smell of roasted turkey and sage stuffing. I had spent weeks working on a biology project about plant cell structures, and I had just found out that I had won the District Science Award. It was the first time I had ever won anything significant. My heart was pounding against my ribs as I waited for a break in the noise. "I have some news," I said, my voice small, barely clearing the centerpiece. "Oh, speaking of news," my Aunt Linda boomed, turning her entire body away from me and toward Savannah. "Savannah, honey, tell us about the guy who asked you to the winter formal. Is he the quarterback?" The table erupted. Everyone leaned in. Savannah beamed, launching into a 10-minute story about how the boy had filled her locker with roses, They laughed at her jokes. They cooed at her dramatic pauses. I sat there, clutching my fork, the words about my science award dying in my throat. I looked at my mother, hoping she would steer the conversation back to me, hoping she would remember that I had news too, but she was looking at Savannah, her eyes shining with pride. I swallowed a piece of dry turkey and decided right then that it was safer to be invisible than to be ignored. But the dynamic began to shift when I entered the 11th grade. That was the year the gap between us stopped being about personality and started being about performance. Savannah had always been smart enough to get by, relying on her charm to smooth over missed assignments and average test scores. Teachers loved her because she made them feel interesting, but I did not have charm. I had work ethic. I studied with a desperation that bordered on obsession, because grades were the only currency I had in a house that did not value my voice. The first crack in the foundation happened on a Tuesday afternoon. We were both in the kitchen. I was doing homework at the island, and Savannah was leaning against the counter, texting. My history teacher, Mr. Henderson, who had also taught Savannah 3 years prior, had handed back our midterm exams that day. 78, Savannah said, glancing at my paper. Not bad. Harper, I think I got an 80 on that one when I took his class. He is a tough grader. I did not say anything. I just slid the paper toward her. At the top, circled in red ink, was the number 98. Beside it, Mr. Henderson had written, "Best score in the history of this class. Excellent work." Savannah stared at the paper. For a long time, she did not move. When she finally looked up at me, the smile she wore did not reach her eyes. It was a flat, dead expression, like a doll staring from a shelf. "Well," she said, her voice tight, "I guess he got softer in his old age." She walked out of the room, but the air behind her felt cold. That was the first time I saw it. The fear. She was not just annoyed, she was threatened. The one thing she had over me was the assumption of superiority. If I was smarter than her, what did that make her? The real turning point, however, came senior year. A letter arrived in the mail from the Future Leaders Foundation. It was a prestigious financial aid program that covered full tuition for students who demonstrated exceptional academic and community promise. Savannah had applied for it her senior year and had been rejected. She had cried for 3 days, blaming the interviewers, the system, the essay prompts, everyone but herself. When I opened the envelope and saw the word, "Congratulations," my stomach dropped. I should have been ecstatic. Instead, I felt a wave of guilt so potent it made me nauseous. My parents were in the living room. I walked in, holding the letter. "I got it," I said softly. "I got the scholarship." My mother gasped. My father stood up and hugged me, a genuine, warm embrace. "That is incredible. Harper, we are so proud of you." But before the hug was even over, I felt my mother stiffen. She pulled back, her eyes darting over my shoulder toward the hallway where Savannah was standing. My sister was leaning against the doorframe, her arms crossed, watching us. The joy in the room evaporated instantly, replaced by a thick, suffocating tension. We were all suddenly terrified of her reaction. Savannah walked into the room slowly. She took the letter from my hand, read it, and then tossed it onto the coffee table like it was a piece of junk mail. "It makes sense," she said, letting out a short, sharp laugh. "They usually pick the people who spend all their time in the library. Admissions officers prefer the boring types. They know people with actual social lives will be too busy to maintain a 4.0 average." "Savannah," my father warned gently, but he did not tell her to apologize. "What?" she asked, blinking innocently. "I am complimenting her. It pays to have no friends. Right, Harper?" I forced a smile. "Right," I said. "Thanks, Savannah." That night, I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling, feeling the sting of her words, but mixed with the pain was a confusing, heartbreaking nostalgia, because the tragedy of us was that she had not always been this way. I closed my eyes and remembered the Savannah from 10 years ago. I remembered being 7 years old, crying on the playground because a boy named Tyler had pulled my pigtails and called me stupid. Savannah had marched across the blacktop, her face fierce and protective. She had shoved Tyler into the mulch and stood in front of me like a human shield. "Do not touch my sister," she had snarled at him. I remembered how she used to sit behind me on the floor of our bedroom, her fingers gentle as she braided my hair before school. She would tell me I had pretty hair. She would tell me I was going to be okay. She was my hero before she became my haunting. That was the part that hurt the most. I knew she was capable of love. She just chose to withhold it the moment I stopped needing her protection and started needing her respect. The final nail in the coffin of our relationship was hammered in 2 years later. I was a sophomore in college, doing well, while Savannah had flunked out of her graduate program after 1 semester. She moved back home, bringing with her a cloud of bitterness that permeated every corner of the house. I came home for spring break to find the house in a state of mourning. We walked on tiptoes. We spoke in hushed tones. If I mentioned a good grade or a compliment from a professor, my mother would give me a sharp look, eyes widening in a silent plea. Do not upset her. She is fragile. I was torn between a deep, aching pity for my sister, who was clearly lost and hurting, and a rising resentment that I was being asked to dim my light so hers would not look so dim by comparison. One evening, I was walking past my parents' bedroom door. It was cracked open just an inch. I heard sobbing. It was Savannah. She was crying about how unfair the world was, how the professors were biased, how nothing was going right for her. Then I heard my mother's voice. It was soft, soothing, the voice she used to comfort me when I scraped my knee, but the words she spoke acted like a serrated knife to my chest. "Shh, honey, it is okay," my mother whispered. "You are still the special one. You have always been the special one. Look at you. You light up a room. You have personality. You have spark. Harper just has grades. That is all she has. Books and papers. You have the real gift." I stood frozen in the hallway. My hand hovered over the doorknob. Harper just has grades. Something inside me fractured. It was a quiet break, like a hairline crack in a windshield, invisible at first but destined to shatter under pressure. I realized then that to my family, my achievements were not a source of pride. They were a consolation prize for being the boring child. They did not see me. They only saw the space I occupied that did not threaten Savannah's spotlight. I backed away from the door, silent as a ghost. I went to my room, packed my bag, and left early the next morning without saying goodbye. I told them I had an early shift at the library. I lied. I just could not look at them for one more second, knowing that my success was something they had to apologize to my sister for. That conversation was the seed. It was the moment I stopped looking for their validation and started building a fortress around my life. But I did not know that on the other side of the wall, Savannah was not just crying anymore. She was watching me. She was watching me rise, and with every step I took up the ladder, she was plotting how to kick it out from under me. I thought I had escaped the shadow of the golden child. I did not realize she was preparing to drag me back into the dark. I arrived at Front Range State University with a single suitcase, a box of reference books on cognitive behavioral therapy, and a naive, blinding sort of optimism. The campus was beautiful in that manicured, catalog-ready way, with red brick buildings and sprawling oaks that looked like they had been guarding secrets for a century. For me, it was not just a school, it was a sanctuary. It was a place where my last name did not immediately trigger a question about my sister. Here, I was not Savannah Lane's boring little shadow. I was just Harper. To pay for this freedom, I had secured the Brightline Scholars Foundation grant. It was a private scholarship, the kind that covered tuition and a modest living stipend, ensuring that I did not have to ask my parents for a dime. That financial independence was my armor. It meant I did not have to negotiate my existence or trade my dignity for rent money. The first semester was exactly what I had dreamed of. I pulled a 4.0 grade point average without breaking a sweat. Not because it was easy, but because for the first time, My effort went straight into my results without being filtered through a lens of family comparison. I met Mackenzie, or Kenzie, as she refused to be called anything else. She was my roommate, a graphic design major with hair that changed color every 3 weeks, and a fierce, protective loyalty that I had never experienced before. Kenzie was loud, messy, and chaotic. Everything I was not. But she looked at me and saw a person, not a prop. Life was good. It was quiet. It was mine. And then, the static started. It began with something so mundane I almost missed it. It was mid-January, the start of my second semester. I was expecting my refund check from the scholarship fund, the money I used for textbooks and groceries. When the deposit hit my account, it was light. $350 were missing. I stared at the banking app on my phone, frowning. $350 might not sound like a catastrophe to some, but to a student living on a fixed income, that was 2 months of food. I assumed it was a clerical error. I walked to the financial aid office, a glass-walled room that smelled of hand sanitizer and desperation. The woman behind the desk tapped on her keyboard for a moment, looking bored. "It says here there was a system adjustment," she said, popping her gum. "What does that mean?" I asked, gripping the edge of the counter. "What kind of adjustment?" "Just an adjustment, hun. Sometimes fees fluctuate, maybe a lab fee or a technology surcharge. The system balances it out automatically." She dismissed me with a wave of her hand. I left feeling unsettled, but I told myself to let it go. It was just money. I could pick up a few extra shifts at the campus coffee shop to make up the difference. I made the mistake of mentioning it during my weekly obligation call to my parents. I was sitting on my bed, knees pulled to my chest. "It is just weird," I said to my mother. They could not explain where the money went. "Oh, Harper, you worry too much." My mother sighed, her voice tinny through the speaker. "It is probably just a mistake. The school knows what they are doing. Do not make a fuss and get a reputation for being difficult." Then I heard Savannah's voice in the background. She was visiting them for the weekend. "Tell her there is no such thing as a free lunch," she called out, her tone dripping with that familiar, sickly sweet condescension. "Welcome to the real world, little sister. Taxes come for us all." I hung up feeling foolish. They were right. I told myself, it was just a glitch. But the glitches kept coming, and they started getting personal. 2 weeks later, I sat in the hallway outside the office of my academic advisor, a kindly woman named Mrs. Gable. I had scheduled this appointment a month in advance to discuss my thesis topic for the following year. I sat on the hard wooden bench for 20 minutes, checking my watch. Finally, the door opened, and Mrs. Gable looked out, surprised to see me. "Harper?" she asked, adjusting her glasses. "What are you doing here?" "I have an appointment," I said, standing up, "at 2:00. She frowned and turned back to her computer. "No, you canceled it. I got your email yesterday morning." My stomach did a slow, heavy roll. "I did not email you." "Yes, you did." She turned the monitor so I could see. There it was, an email sent from my university address at 8 in the morning on Tuesday. Subject: Cancellation. Mrs. Gable, I will not be making the meeting tomorrow. I have other things to do. Thanks. Harper. I stared at the screen, my blood running cold. It was my name. It was my email address. But it was not my voice. Making, spelled M-A-K-E-I-N-G. I had never misspelled a word in an official email in my life. And I have other things to do? It was rude. It was dismissive. It sounded like a teenager blowing off a chore, not a scholarship student arranging her future. "Mrs. Gable, I did not write this," I said, my voice trembling. "Look at the spelling. Look at the tone. Someone else sent this." Mrs. Gable looked at me with a mixture of pity and skepticism. "Harper, it came from your secure account. Maybe you sent it from your phone in a hurry and forgot? Stress does strange things to memory." She did not believe me. Why would she? The digital footprint was right there. I rescheduled the meeting, apologizing profusely for a mistake I had not made, and walked back to my dorm room feeling like the ground was shifting under my feet. "You are checking your phone again," Kenzie said that night, She was sitting on her bed, sketching on her iPad, but her eyes were on me. "You look like you are waiting for a bomb to go off. What is going on with you?" "Nothing," I lied. I was changing my password for the third time that week. "Just stress." "Harper," Kenzie said, putting her stylus down. "First the money, now the email? Someone is messing with you. Are you sure you do not have a crazy ex-boyfriend or something?" "No," I said quickly. "No one cares enough about me to do this." But someone did. The real blow came a month later. I was pulled out of my abnormal psychology lecture by a teaching assistant who looked uncomfortable. He led me to the office of Dr. Keegan Rhodes, the department head. Dr. Rhodes was a man I admired deeply, a brilliant researcher who had hinted at offering me a research assistant position for the summer. When I walked in, he did not smile. He gestured to the chair opposite his desk. "Harper, we received a report through the anonymous integrity tip line regarding your midterm in statistics," he said. His voice was flat, professional, and terrifying. I felt the blood drain from my face. "What? I got an A on that exam. I studied for 3 weeks." "The report claims you possessed a copy of the answer key prior to the test," he said. He slid a piece of paper across the desk. It was a printout of a digital tip. Student Harper Lane was bragging about having the key. "Check her phone." "That is a lie," I said, my voice rising. "Dr. Rhodes, you know me. I would never cheat. Who sent this?" "It is anonymous, as per university policy," he said. "We investigated. We found no evidence on the server that the key was accessed by your account, and your answers showed your work, which is why we are not moving to a formal disciplinary hearing yet. But Harper, this is a serious cloud to have over your head. If another report comes in, we will have to open a full inquiry." I sat there for an hour, explaining my study methods, showing him my handwritten notes, practically begging him to believe in my integrity. By the time I left, he seemed reassured, but the damage was done. The warmth was gone from his eyes. I was no longer the promising student. I was the liability. The research assistant position was never mentioned again. I walked to the library that evening because I could not bear to go back to the dorm. I needed quiet. I needed to study, to prove to the invisible eyes watching me that I was untouchable. I sat down at a computer terminal in the back corner, the one facing the stacks where it was dark and secluded. I typed in my username. I typed in my password. Login failed. I frowned. I typed it again, slower this time, enunciating every keystroke in my mind. Login failed. My heart started to hammer against my ribs. I had just changed this password yesterday. I knew it. It was complex, random, secure. I tried a third time. Account locked. Please contact the administrator. I sat back in the chair, the hum of the computer fan sounding like a roar in my ears. The library was nearly empty, just the soft rustle of pages and the distant cough of another student, but I felt crowded. I felt suffocated. It was not a glitch. The money, the misspelled email, the anonymous tip, the locked account, these were not accidents. They were surgical strikes. Someone was not just trying to annoy me. They were trying to dismantle me. They were pulling the bricks out of my foundation one by one, waiting for the structure to collapse. I looked over my shoulder, scanning the rows of books, half expecting to see a familiar face smiling at me from the shadows. But there was no one, just the empty, silent dark. I realized then that I was not fighting a system. I was fighting a ghost. And the terrifying part was not that I did not know who it was. The terrifying part was that, deep down, in a place I refused to look at, I already knew exactly whose voice sounded like that misspelled email. I just was not ready to admit that the person who had once braided my hair was now trying to strangle my future. The second semester of my sophomore year did not start with a bang. It started with the soft, innocuous ping of an email notification arriving on my phone at 11:30 at night. I was already in bed, exhausted from a double shift at the library, but the blue light of the screen lit up the dark room. I squinted at it, expecting a newsletter or a late reply from Kenzie about grocery money. Instead, the subject line read, Urgent. Academic integrity violation. Behavioral analysis 201. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs before I even unlocked the phone. That class was my life. I loved it. The final paper, a 20-page analysis of conditioned responses in trauma survivors, was something I had poured my soul into. I had spent weeks in the stacks, cross-referencing case studies, drinking terrible coffee, and writing draft after draft until the arguments were watertight. Dr. Rhodes, the professor I respected more than anyone at the university, had read my first draft 2 weeks ago. He had told me it was graduate-level work. I sat up, my hands trembling as I opened the email. It was a formal notice from the Dean of Students' office, stating that my submission had been flagged by the plagiarism software with a 100% match to another document in the database. I felt like I couldn't breathe. It was a physical blow, a punch to the solar plexus. I did not sleep that night. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing through every sentence I had written. Had I forgotten a citation? Had I accidentally copied a block of text from a source and forgotten to paraphrase? But a 100% match? That was impossible, unless I had copied my own name. The next morning, I was sitting in Dr. Rhodes's office again. The room, which used to feel like a sanctuary of learning, now felt like an interrogation room. The morning sun hit the dust motes dancing in the air, but I felt cold. "Harper," Dr. Rhodes said, and his voice was devoid of the warmth it usually held. He looked tired. He looked disappointed. That was worse than anger. "I do not understand. You are one of the brightest students I've ever taught. Why would you do this?" "I did not do it," I said, my voice shaking. "Dr. Rhodes, you saw my draft. You saw my notes. I wrote every word of that paper." He sighed and turned his monitor toward me. "I know you showed me a draft, but the system does not lie." On the screen were 2 documents side by side. On the right was my paper, submitted yesterday. On the left was an identical PDF, word for word, comma for comma. The title was the same. The content was the same. The only difference was the author's name, which had been redacted by the system privacy filter, and the submission timestamp. The other paper had been submitted 48 hours before mine. "Someone turned this in 2 days ago," Dr. Rhodes said gently. "Technically, Harper, you are the one who plagiarized them." "But that is my paper," I insisted, tears stinging my eyes. "I wrote it on my laptop. No one else has access to my laptop. How could someone have my file?" "I do not know," he said, rubbing his temples. "But until this is resolved, I have to give you a 0 on the assignment, and I have to report it to the academic board. If this is upheld, Harper, you could be facing probation or expulsion." I walked out of his office feeling like I was made of glass that had just been shattered. Someone had not just stolen my work. They had stolen my voice. They had taken the thing I was proudest of and used it to paint me as a fraud. When I got back to the dorm, Kenzie took one look at my face and locked the door. I told her everything, sobbing into a pillow while she paced the small room like a caged tiger. "This is not an accident," Kenzie said, her voice hard. "Accidents are forgetting a bibliography. Accidents are citing the wrong year. This is a hit job." She sat down on the edge of my bed and grabbed my hand. "Think about it. Harper, the scholarship money, the weird email to your advisor canceling the meeting. Now this? If someone wanted to push you out of school without laying a hand on you, this is exactly how they would do it. They are trying to make you look like a cheater and a liar so the university does the dirty work for them." "But who?" I wiped my eyes. "Why?" "I do not know," she said. "But we are locking everything down, now." We spent the next 3 hours changing every password I owned: email, student portal, bank accounts, social media. We set up 2-factor authentication for everything, linking it to my phone so that no one could log in without a code. I felt a tiny measure of control returning. I built a digital fortress around myself. But the enemy was already inside the walls. 2 days later, I received a notification from my bank. It was not a login alert. It was a confirmation email for a change of address and billing information request. I stared at it, horrified. I had not requested a change. I logged in frantically, my fingers fumbling over the keys. My address had been changed to a P.O. box in a town I had never heard of, and a request had been made to reissue my debit card to that new address. I called the bank, hyperventilating. It took an hour to freeze the account. They told me the request had been made over the phone by a woman who had verified all my security questions, my mother's maiden name, the name of my first pet, the street I grew up on. Information that only a handful of people knew. But before I could even process the terror of that, the next blow landed, and this one hurt more than the money. I had been in the final interview stages for a summer internship at the Mind and Body Wellness Clinic in downtown Denver. It was the premier internship for psychology undergraduates. It was competitive, prestigious, and exactly the kind of experience I needed for grad school. I had nailed the first 2 interviews. I was waiting for the final offer. I checked my email on a Thursday afternoon and found a message from the clinic's HR director. Dear Ms. Lane, we have received your email regarding your withdrawal from the application process. We are sorry to hear about your current struggles, and we wish you the best in your recovery. We have removed your name from consideration as requested. The world stopped. The noise of the campus faded into a dull roar. Withdrawal? I grabbed my phone and dialed the clinic immediately. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped the device. Hello? This is Harper Lane, I said when the receptionist answered. I think there has been a terrible mistake. I received an email saying I withdrew from the internship program. I never withdrew. I still want the position. There was a long pause on the other end. Then, the HR director came on the line. Her voice was icy. Ms. Lane, she said, we received an email from your personal account at 6 o'clock this morning. It was quite detailed. You stated that you were withdrawing due to a severe mental health crisis and that you were unable to handle the pressure of a professional environment. I did not write that, I cried, desperation creeping into my voice. My email was hacked. Someone is trying to sabotage me. Please, you have to believe me. I am perfectly stable. Ms. Lane, she cut me off. The email came from you, and frankly, this phone call, you sound extremely agitated. We deal with vulnerable patients at this clinic. We need people who are stable, people we can trust. Given the confusion and the nature of the email we received, we cannot move forward with your application. Good luck. The line went dead. I sat on the bench outside the student union. The phone slipping from my hand, I felt stripped, naked. Someone had taken my ambition, my hard work, and my reputation, and twisted them into a narrative of instability. Mental health crisis. It was the perfect weapon to use against a psychology major. It turned my passion into my pathology. I looked around the quad. Students were walking to class, laughing, drinking coffee, but the air felt different. I saw a girl from my statistics class whisper something to her friend as they passed me. They glanced in my direction, then looked away quickly. Did you hear about Harper? I heard she cheated on the midterm. I heard she had a breakdown. I heard she's losing her scholarship. The whispers were not loud, but they were there. I could feel them. It was a slow-acting poison, isolating me, making me radioactive. I was being erased, bit by bit. That night, the dorm room felt too small. Kenzie was out at a design lab, so I was alone with my thoughts. I lay on my bed, staring at the glow of my phone screen. I felt like a hunted animal, waiting for the next trap to snap shut. I opened my message history. I needed to find a pattern. I needed to understand when this started. I scrolled back past the internship rejection, back past the plagiarism accusation, back past the missing money. I stopped at the date of the very first glitch, the missing $350 from my scholarship refund. It was the second week of January. I went to my text thread with Savannah. My thumb hovered over the screen. I felt a sick dread in the pit of my stomach, a physical resistance to what I was about to do. I did not want to know. I scrolled to January. Jan 14. Me. Hey, hope you are okay. Savannah. Just got to Mom and Dad's. Staying for a few days to clear my head. Denver is boring, but the food is free. January 14th, the exact day the first unauthorized access to my bank account happened. I scrolled forward. The day the misspelled email was sent to my advisor canceling my appointment. Feb 10. Savannah. Dad needs help with the Wi-Fi router again. I am fixing it. Why is their internet so slow? She was on the home network, the network where, years ago, I had logged into everything, the network where my old laptop still sat in the guest room closet, the laptop I had wiped, but perhaps not well enough. Or maybe she just used the shared family computer where the browser sometimes saved passwords if you were not careful. I dropped the phone on my chest. The breath left my lungs. No, I whispered to the empty room. No, she wouldn't. I thought about the Savannah who used to chase bullies away on the playground. I thought about the Savannah who bought me ice cream when I scraped my knee. She was my big sister. She was supposed to be the one person in the world who had my back when our parents were being dismissive. But then, another memory surfaced. I remembered the way her eyes went dead when I got the high score in history. I remembered the joke about me having no friends when I got the scholarship. I remembered the coldness in her voice when she told me there was no such thing as a free lunch. The pieces did not form a picture of a sister. They formed a picture of a predator. I rolled over and buried my face in the pillow, squeezing my eyes shut. But I could not shut out the truth. It was not a stranger. It was not a hacker in a basement in Russia. It was the person whose hand I used to hold when we crossed the street. I lay there in the dark, the silence of the room pressing down on me, and for the first time, I let myself ask the question that would change everything. If the person who is trying to destroy me is the person I spent my whole life looking up to, what does that make me? And more importantly, what do I have to become to survive her? The tipping point did not come with a bang or a scream. It came with a silent, gray notification box on my laptop screen at 2 o'clock in the morning. I was sitting at my desk, surrounded by stacks of index cards and open textbooks. It was the week before my thesis proposal was due, the culmination of 3 years of work. I had typed the final sentence of my methodology section and hit the save button. Error. Your account has been suspended due to suspicious activity. Please contact the administrator. I stared at the screen. I clicked OK. I tried to log back in. Access denied. User ID HLane492 is inactive. For a moment, I did not breathe. This was not just a prank anymore. This was not just about making me look bad or stealing a few $100s. This was an attempt to erase me. If I could not access the portal, I could not submit my thesis. If I could not submit my thesis, I would not graduate. Whoever was doing this had decided that it was not enough to hurt me. They wanted to wipe my future off the map. I closed the laptop slowly. The panic that usually flooded my chest was gone. In its place was something colder, harder, and infinitely more dangerous. I was done crying. I was done changing passwords and hoping for the best. I stood up and walked over to Kenzie's bed. She was asleep, a sleep mask pulled over her eyes. I shook her shoulder. "Kenzie," I said. My voice was steady. "Wake up." She groaned and pulled the mask up. "Harper, what time is it? Is the dorm on fire?" "No," I said. "But my life is, and I know who is holding the matches." We sat on the floor for the next hour. I told her everything. I did not leave out a single detail. I told her about the missing scholarship money. I told her about the email to Dr. Rhodes. I told her about the internship withdrawal. And for the first time, I told her about the text messages, the timing, and the sinking realization that the IP addresses were tracing back to a house in Denver that I knew better than my own dorm room. Kenzie did not interrupt. She did not ask if I was sure. She just listened, her expression shifting from sleepiness to shock, and finally, to a sharp, focused rage. "Okay," Kenzie said when I finished. She stood up and started pacing, her hands balled into fists. "Okay, so we are done playing defense. If they want a war, Harper, we are going to give them a nuclear winter." "I do not know how to fight this," I admitted. "I am a psychology major. I analyze behaviors. I do not know how to track digital ghosts." "You do not," Kenzie said, grabbing her phone. "But I know a guy who eats ghosts for breakfast. Get dressed. We are going to the Hive." The Hive was a co-working space on the edge of town, located in a repurposed warehouse that smelled of ozone, old coffee, and burning dust. It was 11 in the morning when we walked in, navigating a maze of desks cluttered with monitors and tangled wires. Kenzie led me to a corner desk where a young man was dismantling a hard drive with a tiny screwdriver. He had dark circles under his eyes and was wearing a hoodie that looked like it had not seen a washing machine in a week. "Miles," Kenzie said, kicking the leg of his chair, "I brought you a case." Miles Ortega looked up. He had sharp, intelligent eyes that scanned me like I was a line of code he was trying to debug. He did not smile. He put the screwdriver down. "I charge $50 an hour," Miles said flatly. "And I do not hack ex-boyfriends' Instagrams to see if they are cheating." "This isn't about a boyfriend," I said, stepping forward. "It is about identity theft, fraud, and someone trying to get me expelled from university." Miles paused. He gestured to the empty crate that served as a guest chair. "Sit." I sat. I told him the story again. But this time, I focused on the technical details, the login times, the specific nature of the emails, the way the bank account changes had bypassed the usual security questions. Miles listened without blinking. He did not take notes. He just absorbed the information. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and spun a pen between his fingers. "Here is the thing about the internet," Miles said, his voice quiet. "People think it is magic. They think if they use a private browser or delete their history, they are invisible, but they are wrong. Every keystroke is a physical action. If someone touched the system, they left a footprint. Even if they tried to sweep the floor behind them, they disturbed the dust." "Can you find them?" I asked. "I can find where they stood," Miles corrected. "I need access. I need your permission to pull the raw logs from the university server. I can get them legally if you sign a release form saying you are hiring me as a consultant for a security audit of your personal accounts. But Harper, I need to know one thing before we start." He looked at me intently. "You kept saying someone, but you mentioned the attacks coincide with visits to a specific location in Denver. You suspect you know who it is." My throat went tight. I looked down at my hands. "Yes." "Is it family?" Miles asked. The word hung in the air between us. "Does it matter?" I whispered. "It matters because family passwords are the hardest to crack," Miles said. "Not because the encryption is strong, but because the victims usually hesitate to give me the keys. If I find something, Harper, I am going to find everything. Are you ready for that?" I thought about Savannah. I thought about the way she used to braid my hair. And then I thought about the email withdrawing me from the internship. I thought about the mental health crisis label she had slapped on me. She had not hesitated. She had not paused to think about my feelings. "Do it," I said. "Find everything." I signed the papers he pushed toward me. My signature looked sharp, aggressive. It felt like signing a declaration of war. While Miles began his work, setting up scripts that scrolled down his monitor in a waterfall of green text, I knew I needed to fight on a second front. I left Kenzie with Miles and walked to the administration building. I had an appointment with the student ombudsman, but when I explained the severity of the situation, the financial theft, the academic sabotage, they did not just offer me counseling, they referred me to a specialist. Dana Solis was a third-year law student who worked in the university's legal aid clinic. She was older than the other students, wearing a sharp navy suit that made her look like she was already a partner at a high-end firm. Her office was small, but organized with military precision. She listened to me with a stillness that was unnerving. She did not look shocked. She looked like she was categorizing every sentence I spoke into potential statutes and violations. "Identity theft," Dana said, ticking off a finger. "Wire fraud, unauthorized access to a computer system, defamation of character. Harper, what you are describing are not pranks. These are felonies. If we can prove this, the person responsible is not just looking at a slap on the wrist, they are looking at prison time." She leaned forward, resting her elbows on the desk. her dark eyes locked onto mine. "I need to ask you a question, and I need you to be absolutely honest with yourself before you answer," Dana said. "Do you want to clear your name and walk away? Do you want us to just fix the thesis portal and get your money back so you can graduate in peace? Or do you want to ensure that this person is dismantled so completely that they can never do this to anyone else ever again?" It was the question that defined everything. The old Harper, the girl who sat quietly at the dinner table while her sister interrupted her, would have chosen the first option. She would have wanted peace. She would have wanted to hide. But that girl had died the moment her thesis account was locked. I thought about the future. I thought about Savannah's jealousy. It was a bottomless pit. If I escaped, she would just find another target, maybe a coworker, maybe a partner, maybe her own child one day. Her need to destroy anyone who outshined her was not a phase. It was a pathology. I sat up straighter. I felt a cold steel rod stiffen my spine. "I do not want to run anymore," I said. "This is not just about me. If they are willing to do this to me, they will do it to the next person who makes them feel insecure. I want to stop it, permanently." Dana smiled. It was a small, sharp smile. "Good. Then we are not just building a defense, Harper, we are building a prosecution." She handed me a list of documents she needed. "Get me everything your tech guy finds. Every timestamp, every IP address. I will draft the affidavits." I walked back to the hive as the sun was setting. The sky over the campus was a bruised purple. I felt different. I felt dangerous. When I walked back into the warehouse, Miles was still typing. Kenzie was asleep in a beanbag chair in the corner. Miles did not look up as I approached. "I found something," he said. I froze. "What?" He turned the laptop screen toward me. The blue light illuminated his face, casting deep shadows. "I traced the intrusion on your bank account," Miles said, "and I cross-referenced it with the login for the plagiarism submission. Harper, they made a mistake, a sloppy one. They used a VPN to mask their location, but the VPN disconnected for exactly 4 seconds during the upload of the fake essay. In those 4 seconds, the real IP address leaked through." He pointed to a string of numbers on the screen. "I ran a geolocation trace," he said. "It is a residential address in the suburbs, the same address that logged into your student portal the night your appointment was canceled." He looked at me, his expression grave. "You know this address, don't you?" I looked at the numbers. I did not need to run a trace. I knew those numbers by heart. It was the house with the beige paint and the rusting swing set. "Yes," I said. "I know it." Miles nodded. He tapped a key, and a new window opened. It was a timeline, a visual representation of every attack, every lie, every stolen moment of my life, all drawing a straight line back to my sister's bedroom. "Prepare yourself," Miles said softly. "Once we open this door, Harper, you cannot close it. You are going to see exactly how much hate went into this code." I looked at the screen, at the mathematical proof of my sister's betrayal. "Open it," I said. "I am done being the one in the dark." 3 days later, Miles asked me to meet him at The Grind, a coffee shop 2 blocks from the university library. It was raining, a gray, relentless drizzle that matched the feeling in my chest. When I walked in, shaking my umbrella, I found Miles sitting at a corner table. He did not have a coffee. Instead, he had a stack of paper 3 inches thick, resting in front of him like a verdict. He did not say hello. He just pointed to the chair opposite him. "Sit down, Harper," he said. His voice was grim, lacking the frantic energy he had shown at the warehouse. This was the voice of a man who had found something rotting under the floorboards. I sat. I did not take off my coat. I felt cold, despite the warmth of the shop. "I am going to walk you through this," Miles said, placing a hand on the stack of papers. "This is not speculation. This is not a hunch. This is a digital autopsy. The data tells a story, and the story is ugly." He flipped open the first page. It was a log of IP addresses, rows and rows of numbers and timestamps. "Column A is your verified location," Miles explained. using a pen to trace the line. We know where you were because your student ID card swiped into the library, the dining hall, or your dorm. Column B is the location of the device that logged into your student portal, your email, and your bank account. He tapped a specific entry. On February 12th, at 8:45 in the evening, you swiped into the library. You were there until midnight. We have camera footage verifying it. He slid his finger to the right. At 9:15 that same night, someone logged into your university account and declined your invitation to the Psychology Honor Society. That login came from this IP address. He circled a string of numbers. 72.14. He read the numbers out. I ran a tracer route on this IP. It is a residential Comcast account registered to a Martin and Linda Lane in Aurora, Colorado. My parents' house, my childhood home. I stared at the numbers. They looked innocent, just black ink on white paper, but they were evidence that while I was studying to make them proud, someone sitting in their living room was actively erasing my achievements. It gets worse, Miles said. He flipped the page. An IP address only tells us where the person was. It does not tell us who held the mouse. Anyone in the house could have used the computer. Your mom, your dad, a guest. But, I asked, my throat dry. But devices have fingerprints too, Miles said. Every network card has a MAC address, a unique serial number. The device that logged into your account to send those fake emails? It is a MacBook Pro. And here's the kicker. He pulled out a second sheet of paper. It was a screenshot of an old Facebook login log. I went digging into cached data from the public web, Miles said. 3 years ago, a user named Savannah Lane logged into her Facebook account from a device with the exact same MAC address. It is her laptop, Harper, the one she has had since college. She did not even bother to use a library computer. She did it from her own machine, sitting on your parents' Wi-Fi. I felt a wave of nausea. It was sloppy. It was arrogant. She thought I was too stupid to look. She thought I was just Harper, the girl who was good at books but bad at life. She never imagined I would find someone like Miles. There is more, Miles said. He was relentless. He wanted me to see the full picture. The emails sent to your advisor and the internship coordinator? Look closely. He placed 2 magnified images of email headers side by side. This one on the left is your real email address, he said. hlane@frontrange.edu. This one on the right is the spoofer. I squinted. They looked identical. Look at the L in Lane, Miles said. In the fake one, it is not a lowercase l, it is a capital I, in the font the university uses. They look almost exactly the same. She created a dummy account that looked like yours, set the display name to Harper Lane, and started firing off self-sabotaging missiles. Most people do not check the metadata of an incoming email. They just see the name and assume it is real. She mimicked me, I whispered. She stole my name. She stole more than your name, Miles said. He turned to the final section of the report. This was the one that made his jaw tighten. The money? The $350 missing from your scholarship refund? He laid out a flowchart. It was complex, showing routing numbers and transaction codes. The money did not just vanish into a system error, Miles said. It was manually redirected. It went from the university disbursement system to a PayPal account registered under a pseudonym, Blue Sky Consulting. From there, it was transferred again to a personal checking account at Wells Fargo. He tapped the final box on the chart. The Wells Fargo account is linked to a mobile number, Miles said. 303-555. I knew the number. I had dialed it 1,000 times when I was scared, or lonely, or just wanted to hear my sister's voice. It is Savannah, I said. The realization settled over me like a shroud. It was not just jealousy, it was theft. She had taken the money I needed to eat, money I had earned, and funneled it into her own pocket. For what? A pair of shoes? A night out? Or just to see if she could make me starve? I stared at the papers. I wanted to rip them to shreds. I wanted to burn them in an ashtray and pretend none of this was real. Because if this was real, then my family was dead. The sister I loved was a fiction. Harper, Miles said softly, do not tear it up. This is your shield. I took a deep breath, forcing the air into my lungs. I know, I am keeping it. Wait, Miles said. We are not done. There is one more thing. And this is the twist I did not see coming until last night. He pulled out one last sheet. It was a log of the financial aid office's internal server. Savannah is a manipulator, Miles said. But she is not a hacker. She knows how to spoof an email, but she does not know how to bypass a university firewall to redirect a direct deposit. She needed access to the internal system to approve that transfer. She needed someone on the inside. My eyes widened. What are you saying? Look at this timestamp, Miles pointed. The request to change your direct deposit info came in at 2:14 in the afternoon on a Tuesday. It was approved at 2:14 and 30 seconds. 30 seconds? I asked. Exactly, Miles said. No administrator works that fast. They have to verify ID, check the forms, match the student records. It usually takes 48 hours. This was approved instantly, which means the person who approved it was waiting for it. He pointed to the user ID associated with the approval, Admin J. Miller. I looked up J. Miller, Miles said. Jason Miller. He is a junior financial aid officer. And guess what I found on his public Venmo feed? He showed me a screenshot from a month ago, a payment from a user named Savannah LL88 to Jason Miller. The caption was just a winking emoji. The amount was hidden, but the connection was undeniable. She knew him? I asked, stunned. Or she found him, Miles said. Maybe they went to high school together. Maybe she met him at a bar. I dug a little deeper into Jason Miller. He is in debt. Harper, online gambling. He owes a lot of people a lot of money. Savannah probably offered him a cut of your scholarship refund, or promised him something else, just to click a button. I sat back, reeling. It was a conspiracy. My sister had recruited an accomplice. She had turned my destruction into a team sport. This is not just a family spat, Miles said, gathering the papers. This is wire fraud. This is bribery. This is unauthorized computer access. You have enough here to put both of them in jail. I took the stack of papers. They felt heavy, like a weapon. Thank you, Miles, I said. I walked straight from the coffee shop to the legal aid office. Dana Solis was waiting for me. When I laid the evidence on her desk, the IP logs, the MAC address matches, the money trail, and the connection to Jason Miller, she went silent. She read every page, her face unreadable. When she finished, she took off her glasses and looked at me. The air in the office was thick with the gravity of what we were discussing. Harper, Dana said, this changes everything. Before, we were talking about academic reinstatement. Now, we are talking about a criminal enterprise. She tapped the paper with Jason Miller's name on it. This employee, Mr. Miller, has committed a federal crime by altering financial records, and your sister solicited him to do it. The moment we file this, the university will have to bring in the police. They will have no choice. The Department of Education takes financial aid fraud extremely seriously. Dana leaned forward. I can draft the complaint today. We can have Savannah served with a subpoena, and we can have Jason Miller pulled in for questioning by the end of the week. But I need you to understand what this means. She looked me in the eye, and her gaze was piercing. There is no going back from this, Dana said. You cannot file this and then drop it when your mom cries on the phone. You cannot stop the machine once we turn it on. This will ruin Savannah's reputation. It will likely get her a criminal record. It will tear your family apart. Are you absolutely sure you want to drag your sister into the light? I looked down at the report. I saw the date of the first theft. I saw the calculation in the fake emails. I saw the deliberate, methodical way she had tried to strangle my future while smiling at me over Sunday dinner. I remembered her voice saying, Harper just has grades. I looked up at Dana. My voice did not shake. She did not act like a sister when she stole my identity, I said. She did not act like family when she tried to get me expelled. If I stop now, she will never stop. She will just get better at hiding it. If I have to choose between her reputation and my life, I choose my life. I pushed the stack of papers toward Dana. File it, I said. If she wants to burn my house down, I am going to make sure she is standing inside when it collapses. Dana nodded once. It was a sharp, decisive movement. Okay, let's go to work. As I walked out of Dana's office, I felt a strange sensation. It was not happiness. It was not relief. It was the feeling of a severed limb, the phantom pain of losing the family I thought I had, replaced by the cold, hard reality of the person I had to become to survive them. The evidence was in the folder, and the folder was in my bag. The gun was loaded. Now, I just had to wait for graduation day to pull the trigger. The war room was a windowless study carrel in the back of the law library, a space barely large enough to contain the three of us and the sprawling map of destruction we had mapped out on the whiteboard. The air smelled of dry erase markers and cold ambition. Miles stood by the board, a black marker in his hand. He had drawn a timeline that spanned the last 6 months of my life. It was a web of dates, times, and digital fingerprints, but they all converged on 2 names written in red ink at the center: Savannah Lane and Jason Miller. It is airtight, Miles said, capping the marker. We have the spoofed emails, we have the bank transfers, we have the connection between your sister and the financial aid officer. We have the logs proving she accessed your portal to decline the internship. If this was a murder case, we would have the weapon, the motive, and the DNA under the fingernails. Dana Solis sat at the small round table, her hands clasped over a thick stack of manila folders. She looked at the board, then turned her gaze to me. Her expression was serious, the look of a general surveying the battlefield before the first cannon is fired. We have the evidence, Harper, Dana said. Now we have to decide on the execution. In legal terms, we have 2 options. She held up one finger. Option 1. We file a quiet, formal complaint with the university administration and the police tomorrow morning. We present the evidence behind closed doors. The school will quietly fire Jason Miller. They will open an investigation into Savannah. You will be cleared. Your money will be returned, and the university will likely handle this with a non-disclosure agreement to avoid a scandal. It is clean. It is safe. It saves the university embarrassment. She paused, watching my face. Then she held up a second finger. Option 2, she said, her voice dropping an octave. We let the clock run out. We know Savannah is planning something for graduation. She has been escalating for months. She thinks she has successfully framed you. If we stay silent for 48 more hours, she will walk into that auditorium believing she is holding a royal flush. We let her play her hand. We let her stand up and accuse you in front of the entire school. And then, and only then, do we reveal that we have been watching her the whole time. I looked at the whiteboard. I looked at the red lines connecting my sister to the destruction of my life. If we go with option 1, I said slowly, what does Savannah tell my parents? Dana sighed. She will spin it. She will say the university made a mistake. She will say you hacked her to frame her. She will say she is the victim of a vindictive younger sister. Without a public witness, the truth becomes malleable. Your parents will probably believe her, or at least they will pretend to keep the peace. That was it. That was the crux of the last 20 years of my existence. Savannah controlled the narrative. If I won in a private room, she would rewrite the story by the time we got to the parking lot. She would make herself the martyr. I am done with her version of the story, I said. The words tasted like iron. I want option 2. I want her to scream it. I want her to stand up in front of 500 people and the dean and our parents and the scholarship board, and I want her to tell everyone exactly what she thinks I did, because once she says it into a microphone, she cannot take it back. Dana nodded, a small, fierce smile touching her lips. I was hoping you would say that. But if we do this, Harper, we have to be precise. We are not just walking into a ceremony, we are walking into a trap that we are setting for ourselves. The next phase of the plan involved the one person who could stop us, Dean Elliott Warren. We requested an emergency meeting. When we walked into his office, he looked annoyed, checking his watch, clearly busy with graduation preparations. But that annoyance vanished the moment Dana laid the first photograph on his desk, the screenshot of the Venmo payment from my sister to his employee, Jason Miller. "This is not just a student dispute. Dean Warren," Dana said, her voice professional and sharp. "This is internal fraud. You have a staff member taking bribes to alter student records. If this gets out to the press before you control it, the integrity of this entire institution is compromised." Dean Warren went pale. He picked up the photo, his hands trembling slightly. He looked at me, really looked at me. For the first time in 4 years, he did not see a student anymore. He saw a liability that needed to be managed. "What do you want?" he asked. "Do you want me to call the police right now?" "Not yet," I said. I stepped forward. "If you arrest Jason Miller today, my sister will know. She will run. She will destroy evidence. She will claim she was coerced. We need her to confess, and we know she's going to try to stop the ceremony to accuse me." The dean rubbed his temples. "You want me to let a disruption happen at my own graduation ceremony?" "I want you to let the truth happen," I said. "We have prepared a dossier. It contains everything. The police report drafts, the cyber forensics, the affidavits. We are going to make 2 copies. One goes to the legal team of the Brightline Scholars Foundation. The other—" I paused, looking at the heavy oak chair behind his desk. "The other goes under your seat on the stage." Dean Warren frowned. "Why?" "Because when she stands up and starts screaming that I'm a fraud," I said, "I need you to have the proof in your hands that she is the one lying. I need you to be the one who shuts her down, not me. If I defend myself, it looks like a catfight. If the dean of the university defends me based on evidence, it is a judgment." He was silent for a long minute. He was calculating the risk. Finally, he nodded. "Get me that dossier. If this Jason Miller is involved, I want him gone by Monday morning." The next 24 hours were a blur of tactical precision. It felt less like preparing for a celebration and more like planning a heist. Dana contacted the Brightline Scholars Foundation. She spoke to their legal counsel, a woman named Ms. Vance. Dana did not give them the full details, just enough to bait the hook. She told them that there were significant irregularities regarding the theft of their funds and that their presence at graduation was critical to witness the resolution. They agreed to attend. They were curious, and more importantly, they were protective of their money. Miles went to work on my phone. We met in the dorm room, which Kenzie had turned into a bunker, complete with blackout curtains and white noise playing to help me focus. "I installed a background recording app," Miles said, handing my phone back to me. "It is fully legal in Colorado. We are a one-party consent state. As long as you are part of the conversation, you can record it." I set it to a shortcut. You tap the volume down button 3 times, and it starts recording in high definition. It uploads instantly to a cloud server. "Why do I need this?" I asked. "Because Savannah is arrogant," Miles said. "She will not just scream at the ceremony. She will try to twist the knife before it starts. She will want to see you sweat. If she approaches you before the ceremony, if she admits to anything, even a whisper, we want it on tape. It is the insurance policy." I practiced the motion until my thumb knew the rhythm by heart. Tap, tap, tap. It was a nervous tick that I turned into a weapon. Then came the hardest part, the family. My mother had texted me 3 times asking about dinner plans after the ceremony. She was oblivious, living in the fantasy world where we were a happy family and Savannah was just going through a hard time. I typed out a response, my fingers hovering over the keys. I could not warn them. If I gave them even a hint, they would tell Savannah to tone it down. They would protect her from herself, and she would survive to torment me another day. "Mom, Dad." I wrote, "I know things have been tense, but for graduation, I just want you to promise me one thing. No matter what happens, no matter what anyone says or does, please stay until the very end. Do not leave the auditorium." It was vague enough to sound like a sentimental plea, but specific enough to lock them in their seats. Of course, honey, my mother replied. We wouldn't miss it. The night before graduation, I stood in front of the full-length mirror in the dorm room. I was wearing my graduation gown. It was heavy, black, and smelled of synthetic fabric. I put on the cap. I looked at myself. I looked tired. There were dark circles under my eyes, and I had lost 5 pounds in the last 2 weeks from stress. But there was something else in the reflection. Something new. The fear was gone. For months, I had been the mouse running through a maze that my sister had built. I had bumped into electric shocks and dead ends, terrified of the next turn. But now, I was standing above the maze. I could see the layout. I could see the exit. I practiced my walk. I walked from the bed to the door. Head up, I told myself. Do not look down. Do not look at her. I imagined Savannah screaming. I imagined the accusations. Cheater, liar, fraud. In the mirror, I practiced my reaction. I did not frown. I did not cry. I simply stopped, looked at the imaginary dean, and waited. Silence, I whispered to my reflection. Silence is the loudest thing in the room. On the desk next to me lay the final piece of the puzzle. It was a prop I had made myself. I had printed out a fake diploma on high-quality parchment paper. It looked real from a distance, but if you looked closely, the text was not Latin. It was a single quote from a case study we had read in Abnormal Psychology about narcissism and collapse. I placed the fake diploma next to the thick manila envelope containing the evidence logs, the police report drafts, and the affidavits. I ran my hand over the envelope. It was 3 inches of paper that weighed more than my entire childhood. You chose this, I whispered to the empty room, speaking to a sister who was not there. You chose the date. You chose the venue. You wanted a show? Fine. I will give you a production value you never dreamed of. I turned off the lights. I did not sleep, but I lay in the dark with my eyes open, listening to the clock tick down the seconds to the end of the world as we knew it. The morning of my graduation arrived not with a burst of sunlight, but with a strange, clinical grayness that precedes a summer storm. I woke up at 5 o'clock. Long before my alarm was set to ring, the dorm room was empty. Kenzie had stayed at a friend's place to give me space. I stood in the middle of the room, looking at the black graduation gown hanging on the back of the door. It looked less like a ceremonial robe and more like a judge's cloak. I ran my hand along the inside of the fabric, feeling for the custom pocket I had sewn into the lining 3 days ago. My fingers brushed against the stiff edge of the manila envelope I had slid inside. It was slim, much lighter than the massive dossier I had taped under Dean Warren's chair, but it was just as dangerous. This one contained the summary, the cheat sheet of my sister's crimes, and the fake diploma I had printed, the prop that would serve as my shield when the arrows started flying. I expected my hands to shake. I expected to feel that familiar, nauseating flutter of anxiety that had defined my last 4 years. But as I touched the paper, my hands were steady, my pulse was slow. I felt the cold, detached calm of a surgeon scrubbing in for a complicated operation. I was not nervous about the outcome. I was just waiting for the incision. By 9 o'clock, the campus had transformed into a carnival of achievement. The university grounds were awash in school colors. Massive flags snapped in the wind, and loudspeakers pumped out an instrumental loop of triumphant brass music that seemed to vibrate in the pavement. Everywhere I looked, there were tableaus of happiness. Students in caps and gowns were hugging each other, screaming with laughter. Fathers were adjusting tassels. Mothers were holding bouquets of roses wrapped in cellophane that crinkled in the heat. I walked through the crowd, clutching my cap. I saw a family holding a glittery poster board that read, "Proud of our graduate," in bubble letters. It made my chest ache for a fleeting second, a sharp pang of mourning for the normal graduation I would never have. But I pushed it down. I could not afford sentimentality today. I found my family near the fountain in the main quad. My father spotted me first. He looked uncomfortable in his suit, tugging at a tie that was too tight. But when he saw me, his face softened. "Harper," he called out, pushing through a group of tourists. He grabbed me in a hug that was tighter than usual, almost desperate. "You made it, kiddo. You actually made it." "Thanks, Dad," I said into his shoulder. I felt him trembling slightly. He knew something was wrong. He had felt the tension in the house all week, but he did not know the magnitude of the earthquake that was coming. My mother was standing a few feet away, holding her phone up to record us. She was dressed in a pastel blue dress that matched her eyes. She lowered the phone and smiled, but it was a distracted, anxious smile. "You look beautiful. Harper," she said, smoothing my hair. "You look just like those girls in the university brochures, like a magazine cover." "Thanks, Mom," I said. And then I looked past her. Savannah was standing 5 feet behind them, scrolling through her phone. She was not wearing a celebratory dress or a supportive smile. She was wearing a stark white blazer with sharp shoulders, tailored to perfection. It was an outfit designed to draw the eye, to reflect the light, to make her the brightest object in any room she entered. She had styled her hair in loose, glamorous waves, and her makeup was heavier than usual. Red lips, defined eyes. She looked like a news anchor preparing for a broadcast. She looked up and caught my eye. She did not smile. She scanned the crowd around us, her eyes darting from the overflowing bleachers to the gathered press near the stage. She was counting. She was estimating the audience size. I could practically see the gears turning in her head, calculating the reach of the scene she was about to cause. "We should get a picture," my mother said, her voice high and brittle. "Girls, stand together." Savannah stepped forward. She stood next to me, but she did not put her arm around me. We stood shoulder to shoulder, 2 soldiers on opposite sides of a demilitarized zone. "I need to use the restroom before we go in," Savannah said abruptly. "Harper, show me where the nearest one is. I do not want to walk all over this campus in these heels." It was a command, not a request. My mother looked relieved to have us separated for a moment. "Go ahead. Girls, we will find our seats." I led Savannah to the Humanities building. The hallway was cool and echoed with the sound of our footsteps. We walked into the restroom, which was thankfully empty. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Savannah turned to the mirror and began reapplying her lipstick. She watched my reflection in the glass. "So," she said, capping the lipstick with a sharp click. "Summa cum laude. That is a big title. Harper." "I worked hard for it," I said, leaning against the sink. My hand slipped into my pocket, my thumb hovering over the volume button of my phone. Tap, tap, tap. I felt the tiny vibration confirming the recording had started. Savannah laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "Work. You always think work is the answer to everything. You think if you just read enough books, the world will give you what you want." She turned to face me. Her eyes were cold, devoid of any sisterly warmth. "You know, I am actually impressed," she said, stepping closer. "I did not think you would make it this far. I thought you would crack weeks ago. But do not worry. I have a little graduation present for you. It is going to be a learning experience." "What does that mean?" I asked, keeping my voice level. "It means that in the real world, Harper, grades do not matter," Savannah whispered, leaning in so close I could smell her expensive perfume. "Narrative matters, perception matters. Some people know how to study, and some people know how to leverage." She smiled, a cruel, tight expression that chilled my blood. "Happy graduation, little sister. Enjoy the walk." She turned and walked out, her heels clicking like gunshots on the tile. I stood there for 10 seconds, letting the silence settle. I pulled my phone out. The recording was saved. Some people know how to leverage. It was vague, but combined with the evidence in the dossier, it was a threat. It was proof of premeditation. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Miles. "The package is secure. Dean Warren has the file under his seat. The legal team from Brightline Scholars just checked in. They are in row 4, seats A and B. And I hacked the camera feed. The university live stream is set to record continuously. No cuts. Whatever happens, the world sees it." I took a deep breath. I looked at myself in the mirror one last time. I adjusted my cap. "Showtime," I whispered. The procession into the auditorium was a blur of black robes and nervous energy. The heat inside the venue was stifling. Despite the air conditioning fighting a losing battle against 500 bodies, I walked in line with the other honor students. My head held high. The music swelled. Pomp and circumstance, a melody that usually signaled a beginning, but for me, signaled an end. I walked up the stairs to the stage. The lights were blinding. I found my seat in the front row of the graduates, reserved for the high honors students. I sat down and looked out at the sea of faces. It was a terrifyingly large crowd. There were parents waving programs, younger siblings playing on iPads, grandparents wiping tears, and in the center, 3 rows back, was the white blazer. Savannah was sitting on the edge of her seat. She was not looking at the program. She was staring straight at me. Her body was rigid, her hands gripping her clutch so tightly her knuckles were white. She looked like a sprinter on the starting blocks, waiting for the gun. To her left, my parents were chatting with a neighbor, completely oblivious. To her right, 2 rows down, I saw the representatives from the Scholarship Foundation, 2 serious-looking people in gray suits, watching the stage with professional interest. The ceremony began. The dean gave his speech about the future, about integrity, about the responsibility of education. Every time he said the word integrity, I saw him glance down at the floor beneath his chair. He knew what was there. He looked pale, sweating under the stage lights. Then, the reading of the names began. Adams, Julia. Applause. Baker, Thomas. Cheers. Castillo, Maria. Air horn. I sat with my hands folded in my lap. My heart was beating a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. Thump, thump, thump. I watched Savannah. As the alphabet progressed, she started to shift. She unbuttoned her blazer. She planted her feet firmly on the ground. She was breathing deeply, preparing her diaphragm to project. She was not just going to shout, she was going to perform. Klein, David. We were getting closer. I thought about Dana Solis's question in her office. Are you ready to let the world see who she really is? I looked at my sister. I saw the hatred in her eyes, a jealousy so deep and consuming it had eaten away everything good that had ever existed between us. She wanted to destroy me because I dared to succeed without her permission. She wanted to humiliate me because my light made her feel like she was in the shadow. But she did not know that shadows are where the monsters hide. And today, I was dragging the monster out into the noon sun. Lamb, Jessica. One more name. I saw Savannah's muscles tense. She leaned forward. Her mouth opened slightly. She was ready. Lane, Harper, summa cum laude. I stood up. And in that split second, before I could even take a step, the sound tore through the auditorium. Scrape. It was the violent, metal-on-concrete shriek of a folding chair being shoved back with maximum force. It was the sound of the loop closing. It was the sound of the past catching up to the present. I did not turn around. I did not flinch. I just fixed my eyes on the podium, took a breath, and let the chaos begin. She bought the exams. She paid someone $2,000 to write her thesis. Savannah's voice did not just carry. It shredded the atmosphere of the auditorium. It was a raw, jagged sound that bounced off the high rafters and slammed into the ears of every parent, student, and faculty member in the room. She has been sleeping with her professors for grades. Ask her. Ask her about the emails. The silence that followed was not the respectful silence of a ceremony. It was the shocked, suspended silence of a car crash. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then, the reaction rippled outward from the epicenter of her outburst. A collective gasp sucked the air out of the room. People in the front rows turned around in their seats, craning their necks. To my left, I saw a sea of glowing rectangles rise into the air. Phones, hundreds of them. The students, my peers, were not looking at me with horror or pity. They were looking at me through their camera lenses. They were zooming in. I could see the hunger in their eyes, the desperate, modern addiction to drama. They did not care if it was true. They just knew it was content. I was trending before I even reached the center of the stage. "She is a fraud!" Savannah screamed again, stepping out into the aisle, her white blazer blazing under the house lights. She pointed a finger at me, her face twisted into a mask of righteous fury. "Do not give her that degree. It is fake. Every grade she got is a lie." My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird, but my face remained frozen in a mask of absolute, terrifying calm. I did not stop walking. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. I focused entirely on the dean, Elliot Warren, standing behind the podium. He looked like a statue. His face was pale, beads of sweat glistening on his forehead, but he did not step away from the microphone. He looked at me, and in his eyes, I saw a flicker of something that looked like respect, or maybe it was just fear. Either way, he held his ground. The murmur of the crowd grew louder, a low roar of confusion and scandal. Is that her sister? Oh my God. Did she say she slept with a professor? This is insane. Is security coming? I reached the dean. The world seemed to narrow down to just the two of us. He held out the leather-bound folder that represented 4 years of my life. His hands were steady, though his knuckles were white. "Congratulations, Ms. Lane," he said, his voice loud enough for the microphone to pick up, booming through the speakers. He handed me the folder. I took it with my left hand. I shook his hand with my right. To the audience, it looked like a standard ceremonial greeting, a polite exchange in the middle of a hurricane. But as I leaned in to shake his hand, I tilted my head just slightly. I spoke in a voice that was barely a whisper, a sound meant for his ears and his ears alone. "Under chair A17, I whispered. "The brown envelope." Dean Warren blinked. His eyes darted down for a fraction of a second. Chair A17 was the seat he had been occupying before he stepped up to the podium. It was the seat of authority. I had not hidden the evidence under my own chair, where anyone could find it or tamper with it. I had hidden it under his chair, directly in the center of the stage, protected by the sanctity of his position. I pulled back and smiled. It was a small, cold smile. The dean looked at me, then looked out at the chaos erupting in the aisle. Savannah was now marching forward, waving a stack of papers, likely fake evidence she had printed out to bolster her lies. "You have to stop this," she yelled at the stage. "I have proof. She is a criminal." Dean Warren turned back to the microphone. He adjusted it. The feedback whine cut through the noise, silencing the room for a second. "Ladies and gentlemen," the dean said. His voice was firm, authoritative, the voice of a man who had run this university for 20 years. "Please return to your seats. All allegations regarding academic integrity are investigated through official, confidential channels. Today, we are here to honor the students who have completed their requirements in accordance with university standards. We will proceed." He did not apologize. He did not ask security to remove her, not yet. He simply refused to let her direct the scene. He denied her the oxygen she needed to burn. The crowd wavered. They looked from the screaming woman in white to the calm, authoritative man in the suit. The momentum shifted. The dean's refusal to engage made Savannah look less like a whistleblower and more like a lunatic. In the fourth row, the two representatives from the Brightline Scholars Foundation sat up straighter. They were not looking at their phones. They were looking at Savannah. I saw the woman lean over and whisper something to her colleague. They were watching the meltdown with the clinical interest of auditors witnessing a liability unfold in real time. Savannah stopped. She looked at the dean, stunned. She had expected him to gasp. She had expected him to snatch the diploma back. She had expected the music to stop and the spotlight to turn to her. When none of that happened, the mask slipped. Her face flushed a deep, blotchy red. The composure she had maintained, the concerned sister act, evaporated. "You are covering for her!" Savannah shrieked, her voice cracking. She stomped her foot like a petulant child. "This whole school is corrupt. I know you took bribes. I know she paid you off. You are all in on it." The crowd recoiled. Accusing a student was one thing. Accusing the entire institution of a conspiracy was another. It sounded desperate. It sounded unhinged. Two security guards in yellow windbreakers materialized from the side of the auditorium. They did not run. They walked with the heavy, purposeful stride of people who were tired of drama. They approached the row where my family was sitting. "Ma'am," the taller guard said, his voice low but audible in the sudden silence. "You need to lower your voice, or we will have to escort you out." "Do not touch me," Savannah snapped, swatting at his hand. "I am exposing a crime. You should be arresting her." She pointed at me again, but her hand was shaking uncontrollably. Her mascara had begun to run, a black streak cutting down her cheek like a fissure in a porcelain doll. "Ma'am, come with us," the guard said, reaching for her elbow. And then I saw it, the moment I had been waiting for since I was 10 years old. My father was standing next to Savannah. Usually, in moments of conflict, he was her first defender. He would be the one yelling at the guards, demanding they treat his daughter with respect. He would be the one making excuses for her outbursts. But today, he was silent. He looked up at the stage, where I stood motionless, clutching my diploma, my head high, looking down at them with a detached, almost regal calmness. Then he looked down at Savannah, who was struggling against a security guard, her face twisted into an ugly snarl, spitting accusations that made no sense. He looked bewildered. He looked from the calm daughter to the chaotic one. For the first time, the narrative he had been fed his entire life, that Savannah was the special one, the poised one, the winner, cracked. He saw the reality. He saw a woman in her late 20s throwing a tantrum at a graduation ceremony while her younger sister stood with dignity. He took a half step away from her. It was a small movement, maybe 6 inches, but it was a chasm. "Dad!" Savannah yelled, looking at him, her eyes wide and frantic. Tell them! She is a liar!" My father opened his mouth, but no words came out. He looked at the security guard, then looked at Savannah, and slowly, painfully, he shook his head. "Savannah," he whispered, his voice trembling. "Stop. Just stop." "You are taking her side?" she screamed, the betrayal vibrating in her voice. "After everything I did?" "Ma'am, let's go," the guard said. Firmer this time. They grabbed her arms. Savannah fought them. She dug her heels into the carpet. "No, you cannot do this. I am the victim here. She stole my life. She is the thief. Harper, look at me." She craned her neck to look at me as they began to drag her backward up the aisle. I did not look away. I watched her. I watched the woman who had terrorized my childhood, the woman who had stolen my money, the woman who had tried to erase my identity. I watched her being hauled out of the auditorium like a common drunk. "People will know," she screamed, her voice fading as they neared the exit doors. "They will know the truth. You are nothing. You are nothing without me." The doors swung open, letting in a blast of bright, blinding daylight from the lobby, and then swung shut with a heavy final thud. The silence that followed was absolute. 500 people sat frozen. The air was thick with tension. Then, a woman in the third row, a mother I did not know, pulled her child closer to her and shook her head, her voice carrying in the quiet room. "That poor girl," she said, looking at me. "Imagine having a sister like that." "Yeah," another parent muttered. "Some people just cannot handle seeing someone else succeed. Shameful." The judgment had landed, but it had not landed on me. I stood on the stage, the lights hot on my face. I looked at the closed doors. My pulse was slowing down. My hands were still steady. Dean Warren cleared his throat. He looked at me and gave a barely perceptible nod. "Let's continue," he said into the microphone. "Next graduate." I walked across the rest of the stage. I did not run. I did not cry. I walked with the rhythm of a survivor. And as I descended the stairs on the other side, clutching the folder that contained nothing but a quote about narcissism, I knew that the real diploma was not the paper in my hand. It was the silence in the room. It was the sound of my own name. Finally, completely, cleared of hers. The ceremony ended not with fireworks, but with a summons. As the graduates filed out, tossing their caps into the air in a cloud of black polyester, a stern-faced administrative assistant tapped me on the shoulder. She did not smile. She simply told me that Dean Warren requested my presence in Conference Room B immediately. She delivered the same message to my parents and to Savannah, who was waiting by the exit doors, flanked by the security guards who had escorted her out, but had not yet released her. Savannah looked triumphant. She smoothed the lapels of her white blazer, shooting a look at the guards that said, "See? I told you." She believed, truly believed, that the university was hauling us in to apologize to her. She thought her outburst had worked, that the dean was terrified of a scandal and was about to strip me of my degree to appease her. We walked in silence to the administration building. The Conference Room B was a glass-walled fishbowl in the center of the executive wing. Inside, the air was 10 degrees colder than the hallway. Dean Warren was sitting at the head of a long mahogany table. To his right sat Dana Solis, looking like an executioner in a navy suit. Next to her was Miles, who was typing on a laptop without looking up. Across from them sat two people I recognized, the representatives from the Brightline Scholars Foundation, and in the far corner, looking like he wanted to dissolve into the carpet, was a young man with nervous, shifting eyes, Jason Miller from the Financial Aid Office. "Sit down," Dean Warren said. It was not an invitation, it was an order. My parents sat on one side, looking bewildered and terrified. Savannah sat next to them, crossing her legs and lifting her chin. I sat on the opposite side, next to Dana. "I assume," Savannah started, her voice dripping with condensation, "that this is the part where you explain why you let a cheater walk across your stage. I expect a formal apology. Dean Warren, and I want it in writing." Dana Solis did not look at Savannah. She simply reached into her briefcase and pulled out the thick, bound dossier we had prepared. She dropped it onto the table. The sound was heavy, a dull thud that vibrated through the wood. "This meeting is not about an apology, Ms. Lane," Dana said, her voice calm and surgical. "This meeting is about a felony." Savannah rolled her eyes. "Oh, please, don't try to scare me with legal jargon. We all know Harper bought that degree." "Let us look at the purchase history then," Miles said, speaking for the first time. He pressed a key on his laptop, and the large monitor on the wall flickered to life. A spreadsheet appeared. It showed the trajectory of the missing $350 from my scholarship refund. "On January 14th, Miles narrated, funds were diverted from Harper's student account to a PayPal account registered to Blue Sky Consulting. From there, they were transferred to a personal checking account at Wells Fargo." Miles pointed to the screen. "The account number ends in 4492. I watched Savannah, for the first time since entering the room. She froze. Her hand, which had been resting on the table, twitched. It was a microscopic movement, but in that silent room, it was a scream. That was the account she had used for years to receive payments for her sporadic freelance marketing gigs. She thought that because it was a personal account, it was invisible. "That number," Dana said, looking at a sheet of paper, "is linked to a Social Security number belonging to Savannah Lane." My mother gasped. It was a sharp intake of breath. "Savannah? That is your account." "It is a mistake," Savannah said quickly, her voice rising an octave. "Someone hacked me. Harper probably set it up to frame me. She is obsessed with me." "Let us talk about the setup," Dean Warren said. He gestured to the corner. "Mr. Miller?" Jason Miller stood up. He was shaking. He looked at Savannah, then looked at the floor. "I am sorry," Jason whispered. "I needed the money. I had debts." "What is he talking about?" Savannah snapped. "I have never seen this man in my life." "You sent him $500 via Venmo on February 10th, Miles said, pulling up the screenshot. "And 10 minutes later, He used his administrative clearance to approve the change of banking information on Harper's profile. He bypassed the security check because you told him, what was it, Jason? Jason swallowed hard. She told me she was Harper's older sister. She said Harper was having a mental breakdown and was spending her money on drugs. She said she needed to take control of the finances to save her sister. She said she was being a hero. The room went dead silent. My father turned his head slowly to look at Savannah. His face was gray. You told him Harper was on drugs? My father whispered. I was trying to help, Savannah yelled, slamming her hand on the table. Look at her. She is unstable. I was protecting the family name. By stealing her scholarship money? Dana asked. By sending emails pretending to be her? Resigning from internships? By submitting a plagiarized paper under her name? I did not do that, Savannah insisted. You have no proof I sent those emails. Anyone can spoof an IP address. Dana smiled. It was the smile of a predator who had trapped its prey. We thought you might say that, Dana said, which is why we subpoenaed the call logs from the university switchboard, but we did not even need those, because, Savannah, you like to brag. Dana nodded to Miles. Miles tapped his phone. A recording played over the conference room speakers. It was clear. High-definition audio. It was the voice of Savannah, chatting with Jason Miller on a phone call that Miles had legally obtained through the discovery process of a fraud investigation. Voice of Savannah. Don't worry about it. Jason, just click the button. The little brat won't even notice. She is too busy with her nose in a book. Once she misses the tuition deadline, she is out. Just a few clicks, and she is kicked out of school, and I get my guest room back. Voice of Jason. Are you sure she won't appeal? Voice of Savannah. Harper, please. She doesn't have the spine to fight back. She will just cry and come home. That is where she belongs. Under my roof, where I can keep an eye on her. The recording ended. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush bones. My mother had her hands over her mouth, tears streaming down her fingers. My father was staring at Savannah as if he was looking at a stranger he had just met in a dark alley. Con, my father whispered, using a nickname he hadn't used since she was a baby. Con, what have you done? Savannah looked around the room. She saw the disgust on the dean's face. She saw the cold judgment of the scholarship representatives. She saw the horror in our parents' eyes. She realized, finally, that there was no way out. The narrative she had controlled for 24 years had shattered. She turned to me, her face contorted, twisting into something ugly and raw. You did this, she screamed, lunging forward in her chair. You ruined everything. You always ruin everything. Why couldn't you just stay little? Why couldn't you just stay stupid? Savannah, my mother cried out, reaching for her arm. No! Savannah shook her off. She pointed a shaking finger at me. I was the special one. I was the one who was supposed to succeed. You were just the background. You stole my spotlight. You stole my parents. You stole my life. I sat perfectly still. I looked at her, and I felt a strange sense of pity. She was so small. All that noise, all that anger. It was just the tantrum of a child who realized she was no longer the center of the universe. I did not steal anything. Savannah, I said softly. My voice was steady, cutting through her hysteria. I worked, I studied, I built a life. I stood up. I looked down at her. I spent half my life living in your shadow, I said. I made myself small so you could feel big. I let you speak first. I let you shine. But I will not let you use that shadow to strangle me anymore. You did not want to protect me. You wanted to own me. And today, I am taking myself back. Savannah opened her mouth to scream again, but Dean Warren slammed his hand on the table. Enough, he said. His voice was final. He stood up and looked at Savannah with icy disdain. Ms. Lane, effective immediately. You are banned from the Front Range State University campus. If you step foot on this property again, you will be arrested for trespassing. Furthermore, the university is opening a formal criminal investigation into wire fraud and identity theft in cooperation with the local police. He turned to the scholarship representatives. "We will be recovering the stolen funds," the representative said, looking at Savannah with cold eyes. "And we will be pressing charges for the misappropriation of charitable assets. You will be hearing from our legal team by the end of the day." "Dad?" Savannah whimpered, turning to him. "Dad, do something. They are going to arrest me." My father stood up. He looked old. He looked tired. He looked at me, standing tall in my graduation gown, and then he looked at Savannah, shrinking in her chair. "I cannot fix this. Savannah," he said quietly. "I have spent your whole life fixing things for you, and maybe that was the problem." He turned to my mother. "Come on, Linda, we need to go." "But," my mother sobbed. "We need to go," he repeated firmly. He did not look back at Savannah. The meeting broke up. The security guards stepped forward to escort Savannah out. Not to the parking lot, but to the police station where an officer was waiting to take her statement. I walked out of the conference room last. I held my diploma in one hand and the heavy dossier in the other. I walked down the long hallway of the administration building. The sounds of the day drifted in through the open windows. Laughter, music, the distant hum of traffic. Behind me, I could hear the muffled sounds of Savannah arguing with the lawyers, my mother's weeping, and the heavy, grim silence of my father. But the sounds were fading. They were becoming background noise. I pushed open the heavy double doors and stepped out onto the steps. The sun was setting, casting long, golden shadows across the campus. The air smelled of rain and pavement. I took a deep breath. It was the first breath I had taken in 4 years that felt entirely my own. I looked down at the diploma. It was just a piece of paper, but it was also a shield. It was proof that I had walked through the fire and come out the other side not as ash, but as steel. I looked up, staring into the imaginary lens of the audience I knew was listening to this story. If a person who was supposed to protect you, a sister, a parent, a friend, turned out to be the one holding the knife against your throat, what would you do? Would you keep their secret to save the family picture? Or would you burn the picture to save your own future? Because I learned the hard way. Sometimes, the only way to heal the family tree is to cut off the branch that is poisoning the roots. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It was not an easy journey, but telling it has been its own kind of justice. I would love to know where you are listening from right now. Are you in your car, at the gym, or maybe hiding in a library like I used to? Please leave a comment below and share your thoughts. And if you want to hear more stories about justice served cold, please subscribe to the channel Lila Revenge Stories. Hit that like button and smash the hype button to help this story reach more people who might need to hear it. Stay safe, and remember, never let anyone write your story for you.